It's time. It's time. It's UFC 299 on Sunday. So that's what we're talking about. Screw Rugby League. Screw everything else. Sean O'Malley's going to get his rematch with Cheeto Vieira, the only person who's beaten Sean O'Malley, even though Sean O'Malley claims he's undefeated. Yeah, what a character. Let's move on to Rugby League. How you going?
Yeah, we will get on to the UFC later. It was funny, we talked on Monday about not having many comments to talk about, John. I think that's changed
crazy,
very quickly in the space of a few days.
Don't mention America on the internet, I think seems to be the theme of the... It's super bad. It's super weird. So let's kick off with Rugby League anyway, as we always do. There is 6 games because of the split round. Most importantly, let's preview. I chucked that in there, but as last. But I think we should do it first. How do you think West Tigers will go against the bye?
Yeah, I like their chances in that one, John. I think they'll get off to a winning start.
Quick elite bet. All of our odds for the year for Rugby League proudly brought to you by Elite Bet.
Do Elite Bet have odds on West Tigers going up against the bye, John?
I think based on history, bye is favourite, paying $1.01. Disclaimer: these odds are not real. So at least West Tigers are going to be 9th, no matter what. They'll be 9th.
Yeah,
They won't be 8th. They'll be 9th because they will have 2 points and 0 points differential. But
have they been given their 2 points yet on the official ladder? That they'll be.
I think it's done at the end.
They'll be 3rd if they have been given their 2 points on.
I think it's done at the end of the thing. But let's just check that. Nope, they have been given it.
So they're 3rd. Okay,
and
they're off to a flying start.
So
John.
Who had that in their bingo card? West Tigers actually being in the in the 8. But the Knights and Raiders are tonight. We are filming on Thursday morning, and I have already instructed producer John today that the videos must from now on go up on the same day they're recorded, producer John. When producer Pyle does it, you'll notice the video goes up, but when producer John, the senior producer, does it, they don't. This guy. Clearly not. But the teams have been named, and strangely, well, actually not so strangely, you had Tyson Gamble in your starting lineup and thought he would get it, and Jack Cogger has been named on the bench for this game.
Yeah, John, it's come, I guess, former great Newcastle Knights 5'8" Matty and high-profile media personality Matty Johns isn't happy about it though, John. He wanted Cogger ahead of Tyson Gamble. He called for Cogger to be picked ahead of Tyson Gamble, but that hasn't eventuated, John. Tyson Gamble's been given the nod. I've got a feeling Willie Mason won't agree with that either, John, somehow.
Who's the I wonder if Willie Mason now includes Tyson Gamble as the people that you notice in the Knights spine. So Tyson, what's it called? Jack Cogger and Kalen Ponga now. Look down that spine. There's only 2 people you know now. Premiership winning 5'8" Tyson Gamble.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure I did put Gamble in my team. Yeah, I did. That's right. This obviously is a rematch of that very drama-filled, epic extra-time elimination final last year, John, where Newcastle got up in a thrilling finish. Kalen Ponga, who won the Dally M, kicked an 89th minute penalty goal to secure that 30-28 win. That was in Newcastle. Obviously the Knights have lost Lachlan Fitzgibbon, Kurt Mann, and of course Dom Young, the try-scoring superstar, who was the top try-scorer in the NRL last year. Canberra lost Jack Whiten as well, John. Corey Horsburgh and Sebastian Chris, they remain suspended, John. So that gives Ricky Stewart a chance to test out some new blood in the season opener. You'd probably have to lean towards the Knights in this one, I would have thought, John. I mean, I don't expect them to have I don't expect them to match their feats of last season. But I think in this one at home against the Raiders, I think they'll get the job done. Yeah,
so Elite Bet, not actual odds, has the Knights at $1.41 favourites to the Raiders $3. Yeah, I can't go past the Knights. Even though the Raiders are hot and cold, it's at home. You'd have to say that the Knights' losses for the season were worse than the Raiders when it's Dom Young to Jack Whiten is the main two kind of thing. But I can't see... The Knights haven't replaced Dom Young with a guy who can score 25 tries. Like, their wingers are Inari Tuala and Greg Mazu. Like, out of those three, Tuala, Mazu and Dom Young, which one do you want?
Yeah.
But then, you put Kalen Ponga in any team, fit and firing, and it should be a walkover. It could be actually a high-scoring game as well, because I don't see either defence holding up against pretty much anything.
Yeah, I can run you through some team news on this one, John. Co-captain Jaden Brayley, he's missing with a hamstring issue, so Phoenix Crossland starts at hooker. He started at hooker successfully through that back part of 2023, John. Dylan Lucas starts in the back row. New recruit Kai Pearce-Paul is named on the bench. As we've just touched on before, Jack Cogger starts off the interchange bench. Adam O'Brien keeps that halves pairing of Jackson Hastings and Tyson Gamble. As for the Raiders, John, teenage prospect Ethan Strange, he's won the battle to have first crack at that number 6 jersey, while Jordan Rapiner is the fullback in place of Seb Chris, as we talked about, who's suspended. English recruit Morgan Smithies will make his NRL debut as part of that run-on side. He's playing lock in the absence of Corey Horsburgh, who, as we touched on, is also suspended. A calf injury to Elliot Whitehead, which will keep him on the sidelines for 3 to 4 weeks, means Zach Hosking, another new recruit, he starts in the back row. Danny Levi's the hooker. Tom Starling on the bench. That means Zach Wolford can't get a start there, John.
Yeah, I can't see past the Knights. Nothing in the teams, nothing in the pre-season, nothing in the end of last season changes my mind.
Yeah, I've had a look at some of the stats, John. The only stat that goes in the favour of the Raiders is they've claimed a round 1 victory in 4 of their last 5 seasons. That's the only one going their way. The other stats all go in favour of the Knights, John. The Knights have won 6 of their last 8 games against the Raiders. The Raiders have lost their last 4 away games. Greg Marju, the Knights winger, he's scored 15 tries in his last 14 games. They're going to be relying on him a lot more with no Dom Young. They're going to need... they're going to really need him to step up to the plate, John, this season. 15 tries in his last 14 games. He's got a good strike rate going. And the Knights have won their last 6 games at home there at McDonald Jones Stadium, John. So
yeah, it's a bit of a...
So most of those statistics going very much in favour of Newcastle there, John.
Yeah, bookies have got it well right. And it's their firm favourites, $1.41 for $3. So, yeah, I can't go past the Knights. That's tonight. On Friday, there's the Warriors versus the Sharks in New Zealand. Warriors' favourite son, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, returns to join Warriors' other favourite son John Johnson, named in the centres, because it's a little bit weird to me, actually, because Charles Nickel-Klokstad is obviously the fullback, and you can't go past Charles Nickel-Klokstad, but he's out. And Tapiki is named at the fullback spot. I would have thought that RTS slotted back into the fullback there.
I guess the only thing I could maybe think of, John, is that because RTS has had this hiatus in rugby union, where he did play for the All Blacks, John, we should point that out to his credit. It could be just maybe a match fitness thing, John, being out of the NRL for that long. Obviously, at fullback, you're going to do a lot more miles in the legs than you will in the centres, and I suspect that it's just about maybe easing RTS back into it and not giving him that bigger responsibility of fullback, given that he's just come back in. Once RTS gets a number of games under his belt, if this scenario were to present itself midway through the season, perhaps we would see a different decision made there by Webster. Perhaps he would move RTS to fullback. But I suspect it's just that time out of the game, that time in rugby union where you're really not required to have the same fitness levels as rugby league, let's face it. I suspect that's why he's opted against putting RTS at fullback for round one, John.
Yeah, the back line for the Warriors looks much better than the Sharks, but the Sharks has got a really good back line. I think this is really actually going to be the match of the round, to be honest. I know there's the Storm Panthers and stuff, which is like big guns, kind of top of the ladder thing, but it's in New Zealand. New Zealand are the heavy favourites at $1.56 with Elite Bet, and Cronulla $2.46. And I expect New Zealand to win. I'll be tipping them, but yeah, I think it'll be a really good battle. Actually, there's a possibility of a really good battle with two gun halfbacks. As I said, two really good back lines. Some good forwards in both teams. I'm actually pumped for this one. It's a 6 p.m. on Saturday.
Yeah, is it
6 p.m.
Friday, that one? Friday,
sorry, 6 p.m. Friday, tomorrow.
Just some team news for you, John. We've already touched on Sean's Nickel-Clockstad with that hamstring. He's out. As you said, Tane to Upiki will line up at fullback. It'll be his 6th NRL game. As you said, RTS at centre. Marata Niukore's picked up a foot injury. He'll miss at least round one. That opens up a spot for Bunty Afoa to return to the fold on the bench. Luke Metcalf gets the nod at 5'8", with Tamari Martin in the reserves. That's an interesting one, John. We thought they sort of could have gone either way with that. Webster's opted for Metcalf over Tamari Martin.
I think there was some issue with Tamari Martin that I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, he's in the reserve, so
heard some.
It could be maybe an injury. I'm not sure, but yeah, he's gone with Metcalf.
Yeah, I think there was some match fitness. I heard there was some match fitness issues. And so he's been sent back to the reserves to get fit.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, as for the Sharks, Nicho Hines has been cleared to play. He's been battling a quad complaint in recent weeks. He's going to partner Braden Trindle in the halves, so Braden Trindle gets the nod there in the halves for the Sharks. Newly re-signed prop Braden Hamlin Ueli. He's at least another week away for a return with a knee injury. So Oregon Kafusi and Royce Hunt will start up front. Toby Rudolph will be on the bench there, John.
So, yeah, I got the Warriors for sure. I can't see past.
I'm going with the Warriors as well, John. A lot of the stats going in their favour. They've won their last 5 games at Go Media Stadium. The Sharks have lost their opening round game in 9 of the last 10 seasons as well, John. Warriors winger Dallin Watene-Zelezniak has 24 tries from his last 19 games. That's a great strike rate, John. Yeah, there you go. The Warriors scored 76 points in home and away wins against the Sharks in 2023, John. So 76 points in 2 games, averaging 38 points a game against the Sharks last year. So very overwhelmingly, those stats are in the Warriors' favour. I just think the Warriors have got far too much strike for the Sharks. At home, John, I've mentioned it before about the Sharks. I was worried about the way they just faded out of their season last year. Lost that game against the Roosters in the finals. It was a terrible game, John.
Yeah, it was.
And they got beaten by the Roosters in that knockout final. So, yeah, I'm worried about the Sharks going into this year. I didn't have them in my 8. I think the Warriors, I tipped them to win the comp. I think they'll do a job on the Sharks in this one, John.
I think it'll still be like a fun match. That's why I'm really intrigued to see how the Sharks go. Like, on paper, the Sharks are so good. It's just going to be down to coaching and preparation. So we'll see how that one goes. I'll be watching it probably on delay. Yes, on delay. Also on Friday, Storm versus Panthers. As I said, that's the heavyweight clash of the round. It's, 3-time premiership winning Panthers versus 3-time premiership winning Storm. But 3 times in 3 years versus 3 times in 10 years. Panthers are the heavy favourites again, with the bookmakers at $1.56 to Storm's $2.46, which is the same odds as the Sharks and Warriors. It's in Melbourne. So Panthers have got to travel. They've just come back from England in that terrible World Club Challenge. Club Challenge. So they've had a bit of travel. There's some injury weirdness there with Munster being named despite having a groin injury. He fell over or something in a groin injury, but still playing.
Yeah, I think he's going to need to pass a fitness test before being declared good to go, John. But, yeah, named in the team. Jerome Luai back from a shoulder injury as well for the Panthers.
And Ryan Pappenhausen's named, so that's going to be a good fullback battle as well. There's a lot of great fullback battles going on this round. Dylan Edwards versus Ryan Pappenhausen. Hope that Pappenhausen can get through the season.
Joe Chan's earned a starting role in Melbourne's back row. It's hard to get a gig in that back row, John. Trent Loiro's moving to lock. New recruit Sean Blore is listed as 18th man as well. I mentioned Jerome Luai. He'll play his first game since being injured midway through last year's grand final victory. Sunia Taruva's set to line up on the wing after he was injured in the World Club Challenge. Taylor May gets first crack at filling the centre void created by Stephen Crichton's departure. In the absence of Mitch Kenny, we all know Mitch Kenny's been suspended from this game, John.
Shows his state of suspension, yep.
Yes, yeah. It's second-year hooker Luke Summerton who gets the nod to start at 9, with Tyrone Peachey named on the bench and likely to see minutes at dummy half there,
sure.
John. The last time the Panthers lost a grand final was way back in 2020, John, to the Storm. That feels like a very long time ago now, with the Panthers winning 3 straight premierships since then. Geez, the Storm's record in round 1 games is just phenomenal, John. The last time they lost a round 1 game was in 2001, and that was before Craig Bellamy started in 2003. So, that's just a phenomenal record in round 1 games for the Storm.
I'm actually tipping against the bookmakers for this one because the Panthers have had that travel. The World Club Challenge was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But still, they've had the travel and they've got to travel again, and Melbourne just don't lose round 1. So I'm tipping against the bookmakers, and I'm going Storm for this.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the Panthers, John. I'll go with them. They'll be looking to become the first team since your Dragons in the 50s and 60s to win 4 titles in a row. Of course, that Dragons team winning 11 in a row, John. Yeah, quite an extraordinary record, that one.
My mum was at the 1966 one.
Yeah, right, there you go. A few stats on this one, John. As I said, the Storm haven't lost a round 1 game since 2001. The Panthers have only won 1 of their 8 games at Amy Park. So there you go, John. Storm winger Xavier Coates has scored 23 tries in 18 games at Amy Park. Moses Leota, the Penrith prop, he'll play his 100th NRL game. Storm coach Craig Bellamy will surpass Wayne Bennett's record for most consecutive seasons as a coach of a single club with 22. There you go.
Yeah, that'll be a good one too. That's tomorrow, 8:05. Then
I'm going to go with the Panthers for a tip for that one, John.
On Saturday, it's not Super Saturday, it's Double Saturday. Yes. Because obviously we're missing 2 games. The NRL opens 5:30. Eels versus Canterbury Bulldogs. Now, the odds for that are... Actually, I think that's the heaviest. It is. So Eels are $1.35 to the Bulldogs $3.20. So Eels, obviously, the super clear favourite there. You can understand why. I mean, basing it off the last few years, the Eels didn't have the best season last year, but they had a much better season than the Bulldogs. In theory, in theory, the Eels have a better team, although that back line for the Bulldogs is just phenomenal. It's just the forwards that I think everybody's putting down on the Bulldogs. I think the forwards are going to let them down.
They're strong. Obviously, they're strong at hooker with Reid Marnie. We want a lot more out of Reid Marnie this year. I think their back row is strong with Viliami Kikau and Jacob Preston, but it's the middle forwards that let them down a bit, John. Like Max King, Posa, Faumasili, and Jamin Salmon at lock. I think that's... Jamin Salmon, I think... For mine, he's a bench player at best, John. To have him in the starting side at lock, that worries me, to be honest.
Yeah, and then you compare it to the Parramatta Eels is Campbell Gillard and Junior Paulo. So when you say Regan Campbell Gillard and Junior Paulo versus Max King and Posa Faumasili, you know who's going to win that battle. And then when you move into the back row, and yes, you've got Kikau, who missed a lot of the year last year, right? Last year was his first year.
Yeah, he did. He missed
and Preston is a second year. Although he was Rookie of the Year at the Bulldogs, it's his second year in the background. And then, Jamin Salmon, who people are going to write off because historically he's a bench player, up against Sean Lane, my man Bryce Cartwright, and Jermaine Hopgood. There's just like the forward matchups are heavily in the Eels' favour. Yeah. And then even when you move to the bench and the Bulldogs have Kurt Mann, Samuel Hughes, Josh Curran and Curtis Morin, like who are these guys? When you compare them to Joe Offengawi, Ryan Madison coming off the bench, it's going to be a...
It's just... And John, that's the thing, the Bulldogs don't really have any... they're missing Oluwapu and Sutton, but they're the only injury concerns at the moment. Apart from that, they've got a full squad to pick from. I think Connor Tracy's just had an injury concern, and he's listed in the reserves, John. I think if he had been fully fit, he would be there in that back five. But I think he's, they're just taking it slowly with him coming back. We mentioned Blake Taff had that awful outing in that trial against, I think it was against the Sharks, where he made 4 handling errors in that trial. That was a worry for me, John. Obviously, you got Jacob Kiraz and Stephen Crichton in the centres, very strong centre pairing. Josh Adokar on one of the wings. But yeah, just the middle forwards like we talked about, and the halves, John. Braithen Astor was blowing up on NRL 360. He wanted to see Toby Sexton given the gig ahead of Drew Hutchison at halfback there, but it's gone in favour of Hutchison. John, the Bulldogs are not going to... They're not going to turn things around until they get an established, notable halfback, a genuine halfback who can guide them around the park. I've mentioned it before a number of times. The Bulldogs have not had a halfback since Brett Kamali retired in 2010. They have not. And I know Trent Hodkinson played for them since then, John, and that might be seen as a bit of a dig at him, but he was not in the class of Brett Kamali, and he was not in the class of Brent Sherwin before Kamali. The Bulldogs haven't had a genuine halfback since Kamali retired in 2010. So for mine, it's just this run of not making the 8. It's just going to continue, John, until they address that. There's no reason to think that they're going to enter the top 8 this season for mine.
Yeah, I don't think anyone expects them to make the 8 except for some crazy people. I've seen a few hot takes on social media where people list this is my hot take for the year. A hot take is just basically internet slang for I'm going to say something stupid so people argue with me and I get some internet clout. It's you can't tip against the Eels in this.
No, it just I look at the Bulldogs team and it's just underwhelming, John. As I said, those middle forwards and the halves, there's just some real glaring weaknesses there.
You can't carry a team forward on your back line. Your back line doesn't push it forwards. Your forwards do. So the back line plays off the back of good forwards giving the ball quickly to the halves, and then your back line can come into play, and a killer back line can then score all your points, right? But unfortunately for the Bulldogs, they just don't have forwards that are going to go over the Eels to get forward momentum to give the halves time to bring the back line into play, no matter how good the back line is.
How can you make the top 8 in this competition with weak halves and weak middle forwards, John? How can you do it? You've got a bench player in Jamin Salmon playing at lock. It's just... They're just not going to make the 8 this year, John. And I mean, we can have a look at some of the team news. The Eels... Mike Acevo's serving a 3-game ban, John. Bailey Simonson shifts to the wing. New recruit Morgan Harper will partner Will Penasini in the centres. Joey Lussick's named to start at hooker with Brendan Hands coming off the bench. Ryan Madison is good to go off the bench coming back from a back injury, John. Warimu Greg with a hamstring will miss the season opener. The Bulldogs, Stephen Crichton, the captain, lines up at centre. The new recruit lines up at centre alongside Jacob Carraz, as we've mentioned. Blake Taft to start at fullback. Don't know how that one's going to go, John, after his trial form. They're going to give, as I said, they're going to give Drew Hutchison the nod there. He'll partner Matt Burton in the halves. Josh Curran starting on the bench. You mentioned Kurt Mann, Curtis Moran and Sam Hughes on the bench there, John. The Eels have won 7 of their last 8 against the Bulldogs. That doesn't bode well for the Bulldogs
I don't think that means everything because everyone's won 7 of their last 8.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's
except maybe the Dragons and the Tigers.
Yeah, I don't think the Eels are on their own with that, John.
Yeah.
The Bulldogs have a terrible record at Combank Stadium. They've only won 2 of their last 15 games there.
I think they've also, again, only won 2 of their last 15 games at every stadium.
Yeah, again, it's not specific to Combank Stadium. Eels fullback Clint Gutherson has scored 9 tries in his last 10 games against the Bulldogs. This is just not good reading for me at all.
That could also
John.
possibly be true about every other player in the league, given their defensive woes.
The Bulldogs have opened with a win only once in their last 7 years. Again, John, that's not specific to round 1. They haven't made the top 8 in the last 7 seasons, John.
They probably haven't won their second game in the last 7 years, or third. Well, they won their second game last year.
It'll be a 100th NRL game for Eels 5/8 Dylan Brown as well.
So
John.
everybody's going to go the Eels, and that's pretty obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Then also on Saturday we have the Titans versus the Dragons. Now Luciano Leilua had his suspension successfully reduced by 1 week.
Yes.
The Dragons appealed it, so that's bizarre. So that means he's not in this week. He'll be back next week.
There's a lot of strange things happening with suspensions at the moment, John. A lot of leniency where there probably shouldn't be leniency.
Yeah. Gold Coast is a favourite with Elite Bet at $1.48 with St George Illawarra Dragons at $2.70. This is in Queensland. Carl Flanagan will be the 5/8 as expected.
What do you think of that, John? Is that just no other option?
Yeah, there's no other option.
Yeah.
There's seriously no. They had other options and they lost them all because of hammer attacks.
Yeah, hammer attacks are not ideal, John.
Yeah, Jack Bird's been named in the centres, pushing Zach Lomax out to the wing, which a lot of people aren't agreeing with. In the trials, Zach Lomax played really well on the wing, but not as a winger. He was playing as a centre on the wing, and a lot of the time Jack Bird was in his way. Not because Jack Bird was playing poorly, but because Zach Lomax is a centre. Ravalav... Did producer John just break another glass? Ravalava's back on the wing. I think the Tom Eisenhuth was the player of the trials for the Dragons. It's good to see him there, but
yeah.
Look, I don't see the Titans doing well. I think this is if the Warriors Sharks is my match of the round, this is the worst match of the round.
Yeah, what are the odds on that one, John?
$1.48 for the Titans and $2.70 for the Dragons.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like it's going to be a terrible, terrible game of football.
Yeah, of course. Des Hasler starts his reign as Titans coach.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about the Titans because nobody knows what Des Hasler's going to pull.
That's the thing. He's always got tricks up his sleeve. Obviously, as a Bulldogs fan, I remember in 2012 when he first started there. He came up with the forwards as the ball players, the forwards just passing the ball at every opportunity. So that was his little trick shot to start off at the Bulldogs. So we'll see if he has a trick shot up his sleeve here as he starts out with the Titans.
Yeah, I don't know what the Titans are going to do, so it's hard for me to give any opinion. You just don't know.
It was interesting what Craig Gower pointed out when he was on here a couple of weeks ago, John, was he said the problem with what Hasler did there at the Bulldogs with the forwards being the ball players is, I mean, at first they were able to catch a lot of teams out because it was a surprise tactic. But once teams were alert to it, the defensive lines were able to shut it down very quickly because the forwards obviously don't have the same agility as the halves or the outside backs. And so once teams, I guess, had a bit of time to adjust to it, they were able to shut it down very quickly.
Yeah.
So Des has got to be careful that he's not a one-trick pony. And, you know, once teams work out his new game plans, he's got to be ready to adapt the game plan.
I'm really curious as to what the Titans will come out and do. It
could be anything.
Your ex-captain, Raymond Fatalamaran, has been named on the bench for the Dragons. He doesn't have a photo yet on the NRL.com because he hasn't been pictured in a Dragons jersey yet.
Yeah.
Don't they Photoshop these things? Come on.
Yeah, Fatalamaran is joined by Michael Molo on that bench as well, John. Connor Mulison and NRL debutant Viliami Fafita are also on that bench, John. Shane Flanagan stuck with Terrell Sloan at fullback, of course. Zach Lomax on the wing for the season opener. Hooker Jacob Little with a hamstring and prop Blake Laurie with a rib injury. They're good to go, John. So there you go. That's your Dragons team news. As for the Titans, Keanu Keeney takes over in the number 1 jersey. Jaden Campbell likely to miss the first month with a knee injury, John. The absence of David Fafita with a pec injury sees Beau Firma move to the left edge, while Cleese Haas claims the other second row spot with former Bronco Keenan Palacia at lock. AJ Brimson is right to go in the centres after failing a HIA in week 2 of the pre-season challenge, while Isaac Liu with a knee is cleared to play in his 250th NRL game.
He's been around forever. And I was just if I was listening to it, listening to him when he was at the Roosters, I'd think, when did Isaac Luke change to the Roosters?
And I mean, we've said it before, John. Let's face it, Kyle Flanagan wouldn't have got this gig at the Dragons if it wasn't for his dad.
He was good in the trials, I guess, but you know the trials were so demented for the Dragons specifically because in the Charity Shield it was a terrible first half, and then the Dragons took Ben Hunt off the field and got him a shower, indicating he was never coming back. Then they got smashed. And in the West Tigers one, I don't know, were the West Tigers that bad or were the Dragons that good, or you just don't know. So
I mean, he's been let go of by the team that finished third last and joined the team that finished second last. So that's the reality of the situation. A few stats for you on this one, John. The Titans have won 4 of their last 6 games against the Dragons. I'm sorry to say for you.
Yeah, it's really funny. You know, the Dragons, I'm pretty sure the Dragons were the last team to lose to the Titans, and they used to be their bogey team when they first came into the comp, and then all of a sudden, Dragons suck.
Yeah, the Dragons' record at Seabus Super Stadium isn't great too, John. They've lost their last 4 games there. Titans winger Alafiana Khan Pereira scored 20 tries in 23 NRL games. That's an upside for the Titans. Michaeli Ravalawa also is very handy with crossing the stripe, as you know, John, the Dragons winger. 15 tries in his last 12 NRL games. Titans forward Isaac Liu will reach the milestone of 250 NRL games if he overcomes injury in time to play in this one, John.
He'll be right. You can't... It's obviously going to be the Titans. Dragons are terrible. It is Flano's first game in charge. And Des Hasler's first game in charge, so nobody really knows what's going to come out. But based on trial form alone for the Dragons, I got to tip the Titans. And you never know what Des Hasler's going to do.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Titans. I think just Des Hasler's ability to make an instant impact at his new clubs.
Yeah.
I think that, and obviously the Dragons. We all think they're going to struggle this year, John. So I think those two things put together put this one in the Titans' favour for sure.
Yep. And the last game of the round is the Dolphins versus North Queensland Cowboys on Sunday at 4:05 p.m. Cowboys are favourites at $1.57 and the Dolphins are $2.48. Just a reminder, is this a bet you really want to place? For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au. That's our last odds thing for this. So,
two teams that missed the finals last year, John, they'll be looking for a good start to 2024.
Yeah, and Jake Averillo wasn't named. I thought that was really weird, right? He's in the reserves. He was the second best try scorer at the Bulldogs, or best try scorer, second best after Addo Carr.
Yeah.
And he wasn't named. That's a big loss to the Bulldogs, and to go to a team that also missed the 8 and not get named. So I thought that was quite shocking.
That's bizarre to me. I can only think, what was, Bennett maybe not happy with his preseason. I don't know. I can't think of going on his 2023 Bulldogs form. You'd think he'd get a start. The only thing I can think of is, Bennett wasn't happy with his preseason, John.
Bit weird.
I don't think, as far as I can tell, he's not injured. He's just been left out of the 17.
Ex-captain, well disliked by the club, $1 million man Jason Taumalolo named it prop as well. On
that big 10-year contract, John. That's the danger of signing someone on such a long-term deal, isn't it? Huge money deal.
So you look through this, they both have really good players, actually. Both of the teams have really good players. It's a bit of a sneaky one. I know it's hard to call. I know Cowboys are very heavy favourites with the bookmakers, but everyone is very heavy favourites to open the round with the bookmakers.
I'm happy to run through some more detailed team news on. So for the Dolphins, that loss of Origin forward Tom Gilbert to a ruptured ACL, that brings Ray Stone in at lock and Kenny Bromwich will come from the bench. Halfback Sean O'Sullivan failed a HIA against the Warriors in week 2 of the preseason challenge, but he's right to line up alongside Cody Nikorima in the halves. Of course, they've had that week break in between, John, so that's probably got him over the line there. Former Broncos Herbie Farnworth and Tom Flegler should feel right at home, John, as they launch their Dolphins career on familiar turf at Suncorp Stadium there. Tessie, Niu and Jack Bostock team up on the left side with no room in the 17 for Ewan Aitken and, as you mentioned, John, Jake Averillo. For the Cowboys, veteran Kyle Felt has won the battle for the right wing spot, that 2015 grand final hero Kyle Felt, John. Semi Valame named among the reserves. He's another one who's contending for a spot in the outside backs there, John. Zach Laybutt will play his 5th NRL game as he takes over at centre from the departed Peter Hiku. The season-ending injury to Cohen Hess sees, as you said, Taumalolo starting at prop. Sam McIntyre joins the bench. Thomas McKayle's strong trial form wasn't enough to win him a spot in the 17. He's listed in the reserves alongside Jack Gasiewski and Jake Clifford, John.
I don't think moving Jason Taumalolo to prop is his best spot. I thought he was the best at back rower, but who knows? It's such a hard one to call. I'm actually going to go against the bookies again and go with the Dolphins on this one. I can't really 100% rate. Todd Payton's the coach, right?
Yeah.
Todd Payton over
Cowboys,
over Wayne Bennett. If you remember last year, there was the same kind of odds in the opening round on Dolphins end up winning their first 3 before succumbing to a massive injury toll. They've got depth this year, as you've just gone through. I think their bench is pretty good. I actually think the Dolphins are going to get it.
Yeah, okay. Well, the Dolphins have won 3 of their 6 derby games against Queensland opposition last year, John, so that's pretty good for your first season to have that record. The Cowboys have won 4 of their last 5 at Suncorp Stadium, John, even though they had that poor season last year. Dolphins winger Jermaine Asako scored 7 tries in 8 games at Suncorp Stadium in 2023. Asako was the regular season leading try scorer last year, John. Dom Young was the leading try scorer overall, including finals, but Asako was the regular season leading try scorer. Cowboys fullback Scott Drinkwater has scored 9 tries in his last 12 NRL games. Dolphins forward Mark Nichols will play his 150th game in the NRL. I'm going to tip the Cowboys, John, just because I think that 2022, where they made the prelim, was more reflective of where they're at than what last year was. I just think last year, I'm willing to just call that a blip on the radar, John, and I think they'll be a lot better this year. I've got them making the 8 this year, the Cowboys, so I'm going to go with them. I'm going to go with the bookies on this one, John.
Awesome. So we've got some differences and we'll see what happens. That's the previews for the week. We can move on to Rugby League news and, of course, the one
yes, there is really
news article.
One story, yes.
Is the Spencer Leniu-Mam issue. There's a lot has happened. Broncos players are, of course, backing Mam, and there's a couple of them that said they come forward to give evidence. It's all going to come down to they said, he said. But as I said before, Spencer Leniu is not denying it.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it, John? That was sort of curious that he wouldn't deny it. You would assume that somebody accused of such a horrible act really would come out and deny it, but he didn't. So, John, now what's going to happen is, obviously there's going to be a judiciary hearing on Tuesday, John, where it will all
referred straight to the judiciary.
Yeah, it will all play out. This is another one of those offences, isn't it, John, where if you're guilty, it's a huge suspension. There's sort of no in between with this. If you said it, well, you're gone for a long time. Obviously, you either said it or you didn't say it. And if you're guilty of it, well, you'll be taking a long holiday. So Billy Walters, who was in the vicinity of when the alleged comment was made, he said that he's willing to give evidence at the judiciary if called upon, John. So there you go. We should point out, John, that the referee didn't hear this, and I had read reports that there was no audio, but I believe you've seen something on TikTok where there was maybe perhaps audio.
So the official line is there's no audio when it all comes down to players who heard it or whatever, and it's like 3 players versus Spencer Leniu, but as I said, Spencer Leniu hasn't denied it, but internet sleuths have isolated the audio of the incident, and you can actually clearly hear him saying it in the isolated audio. Now, it is like stuff on TikTok, so hell, they could have manipulated it, but the thing with it is I also, one of the things that's been said, unnamed sources from the Panthers, is Mam used some kind of slur against Spencer Leniu in the grand final. And so, it's not a defence, but Spencer Leniu's thought process was, so that's what we're doing now. And he didn't make any formal complaint, so he doesn't understand why Mam would make a formal complaint. So that's why he said, what happens on the field stays on the field or whatever. It's all fun and games on the field. Now, again, that's all unnamed sources, things I've heard from different people in the game.
So I wonder whether that would form part of Leniu's defence at the judiciary. And I also wonder whether, you mentioned this TikTok footage that's come to light. I mean, you mentioned, John, it could have been manipulated by the TikTok types, but could that be used as evidence as well?
The way I see it, right, for something like that is because they say there's no audio, which means they feel like there was no microphones. But if people on the internet can spend a couple of days and isolate audio, then surely the NRL can do the same thing. So even if it was manipulated footage or anything like that, the NRL can sit down and go, all right, because when you do video editing you can isolate, or I don't know how it all works technically, but, see it in the movies. They turn some knobs and the crowd goes down. It's obviously nonsense in the movies, but the internet can do it, so therefore they can do it. And I think the most damning thing is Leniu absolutely doesn't deny it.
So should the NRL then look to hire somebody to obviously, they don't want any tampering with their original footage or anything. Should they look to hire somebody who can really hone in on this without tampering with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And see what they can find.
Because like I said, if people on the internet can do it, then professionals can do it. And like you said, if he said it, which he doesn't deny, it's a long suspension. You can't justify it by saying, but he called me mean names first. That's not a thing. But still, if that was to come out and, if he's... I heard it from people in the game, right? And if people can go through that video footage and isolate audio and stuff and find Spencer Leniu calling Ezra-Mam a monkey, then they could start going back to the grand final and finding the time when Ezra-Mam allegedly called Spencer Leniu, I think it was coconut, he said. Then what happens?
We'll see how that's very interesting. We'll see if that comes out at the judiciary hearing. We'll see if that forms part of. Obviously, it's no excuse, John, but it'll be very interesting to see if that forms part of Leniu's defence, and if that audio of Mam saying a similar thing about Leniu, as you've just mentioned, well, if that's out there, well, could that be brought to light as well? This is really potentially opening up a Pandora's box.
Yeah, because Leniu is in American stuff, the judiciary hearing won't be till next Wednesday, so we will be able to update on next Thursday's episode.
Actually, sorry, I read that it was Tuesday.
Tuesday,
the judiciary
Tuesday
hearing. Yeah, so. And John, also apparently a new front on camera angle of the incidents emerged as well. Channel 9 aired a new angle of the alleged incident from in front, showing Leniu tackling Payne Haas before saying something to Mam in the background.
Yeah.
I don't know, if you can't, saying something, all right, as you say, you need to know what he said. You can't just saying something doesn't, convict Leniu.
Then they get the lip readers in. It's like an internet thing. They get the lip readers in and say, I'm a lip reader, and this is what I say, and then you can go and find like 20 different people saying 20 different things. Yeah.
Well, that's you mentioned the lip readers, John. Well, there's even the possibility that the NRL could employ a lip reader to use at the judiciary as well. As I said earlier, John, the referee didn't hear it, and wasn't picked up on the ref's mic. But
it's only going to come down to players saying this is what he said, and then they can find some internet footage and stuff like that. But I just think the main thing is he doesn't deny saying it. He's not. I don't expect Spencer Leniu to sit down in front of the judiciary and say, "I'm not guilty because I didn't say it." I expect him to sit down and say, I'm not guilty because he said stuff to me and I thought that was what the bag was. That's what our go was now. We're going to be racist to each other. So we'll see what happens on Tuesday. I'm sure it'll be a long one. And it'll be like live tweeted and stuff by all the media organisations.
Yeah, that'll be big on Tuesday, John. Absolutely.
It is the number one story.
I think the fact that we've only had those two Vegas games, and you need more games to be played for more news to come. The fact we've only had two games has left a bit of a vacuum in the news cycle, and this has really filled that vacuum this week, John. I mentioned that new front on camera angle. That'll be probably used as evidence there, John. Yeah, as you say, it seems like, short of the NRL employing some expert to really get that little bit of audio out of it, John, it does seem like this is really going to hinge on the evidence of players, like Billy Walters, who said he's prepared to come forward, with the referee not hearing it. The thing that really annoys me about this, John, is going into the going into the Vegas games, I think other codes in Australia would have been really envious of the NRL. They would have looked at the NRL in awe of what the NRL's doing. Oh, look at this. They're going to play in Las Vegas, a doubleheader in Las Vegas. But in light of this incident, that's given licence for these other codes in Australia to really just laugh at the NRL and go, oh, yeah, trust the NRL to have this, disgrace, well, the alleged incident, to have this disgraceful incident play out in America, of all places, as we've talked about, a country that's very sensitive to racism. Those other codes are just going to be laughing in the face of the NRL now, John. They're going to go, I trust the NRL to go all the way over to America and have this this incident occur.
Yeah, that's it. It's like I said the other day, it's like the centre of racism. You go to the centre of racism, the current world centre of racism, and do some racist stuff, and it just makes you look stupid. Just invest all this money, all this time, all this effort, everything, have an amazing event, and then just look stupid. It's just ridiculous. And
should we move on to? If we move on to honestly, guys, it's just our opinion now, John.
Yeah.
Should players be muzzled? And this is another aspect of this case. Should players be muzzled from commenting on the Leniu-Mam case? We have had players make comment on it. Yeah, look, it's an interesting one, John. I mean...
Yeah, so obviously every Indigenous player has had a comment, Latrell Mitchell more than others, because he's the guy that's front and centre for everything to do with Indigenous players. Nico Hines brought out the Sharks Indigenous training shirt to a press conference and said, we're with you, Ezra. Jonathan Thurston's commented, and I didn't know this until this came up, that players aren't allowed to comment on judiciary charges, actually, in the media. They're not allowed. So for careless tackles and all that kind of thing, they're not allowed because it will weight. Just like jury members aren't allowed to watch the news about their case. And what's happened now is, nobody is condoning anyone being racist. But what's happened is, even if Spencer Leniu wasn't guilty and he was come out and said, I didn't say it, I didn't say nothing, if all these players are coming out in support of Ezra Mam's thing, it creates a guilty until proven innocent.
And that's the thing, John. Isn't the NRL judiciary it's the NRL's version of a courtroom? Yeah,
exactly.
So you've got to have your day in court, and in this case, you've got to have your day at the NRL judiciary. And so Leniu hasn't had his day in court yet, John, on this at the NRL judiciary. Yeah. And so what happened with Latrell Mitchell was Andrew Voss actually, there was a post with a quote from him suggesting Leniu could be suspended for half the season if found guilty. Latrell Mitchell wrote, and some. Now, this hasn't been played out at the judiciary. He hasn't had his day at the NRL judiciary, and Latrell Mitchell has taken it upon himself to make comment on how long the suspension should be, John. Again, players are not supposed to make these comments on matters that haven't been played out at the judiciary. Now, if Spencer Leniu happens to be found guilty of this at the judiciary, John, Latrell Mitchell, go for it. Condemn him. Go for your life. By all means, condemn him over it. But he has not been found guilty of it yet, John, and Latrell Mitchell has gone off early in this instance. And other players, you mentioned Nico Hines, you mentioned that Cody Walker as well has come out before he's had his day at the judiciary. And so we're going down a dangerous path, John, if players are allowed to make these public comments on a matter that is before, that is yet to be heard at the judiciary. And this, it's just not the correct process.
No,
from
it's not.
From Latrell Mitchell has not followed the correct process here, John. He needs to wait until Leniu's had his day at the judiciary. If he's found guilty, well, then that's your time to give it to him on social media over it. But until he's been found guilty, well, Latrell Mitchell's gone off too early there, John.
Yeah, 100%. what's going to happen if he doesn't get a, whatever it was, 12-week suspension and then some?
But what happens if he's found not guilty, John? And Latrell Mitchell said this about him on social media. Nicho Hines and Cody Walker have come out and spoken out against him as well. There's the possibility that he'll be found not guilty, John. There is that possibility at this stage, and if he is, well, it's not going to look very favourably upon Latrell Mitchell if he's found not guilty, John.
Yeah, 100%. And any of them, not just Latrell Mitchell.
Yeah, Cody Walker and Nicho Hines as well.
And then other media. So when a player gets a reckless or careless or whatever high tackle or, lifting above the horizontal and all that kind of thing, media pundits will jump in, right? They do. Players aren't allowed to. This is no different, even though it's not a physical charge. It's a judiciary charge. So Latrell Mitchell posted straight after the game or whatever. Straight away. Like, he already did one post straight after the game or not long after it, next day or whatever. And that should have been shut down. But the fact that it wasn't left it open for everyone else to be allowed to give their comments, all other players. Now, active players, they're not allowed to comment on judiciary matters. They're just not. That's it.
Yeah. And that post you mentioned from Latrell Mitchell, that was where he came out and said, well, the NRL better deal with this shit. That was the quote from Latrell Mitchell. And then he added that extra comment on that post from Andrew Voss.
Yeah, so Latrell Mitchell's saying something when he's technically not allowed to and not getting in any trouble for it meant that Nicho Hines and Cody Walker and a few other players felt that, like, we're allowed to say something about this one. So what's the line now? What is the line that where you're allowed to talk about things in front of the judiciary and you're not? What's the line? They're also not allowed to talk about things in front of the integrity committee and stuff like that. So when Mitch Kennedy talks about Boxing Day lines, they're not meant to comment on that either. What's the line now? So if some player gets filmed doing a racist remark against somebody outside of the match, right? Then it goes through the integrity committee as opposed to the judiciary, and then all that stuff. Are players allowed to comment on that? They've set a precedent in which players are allowed to comment on any, starts with the racism, but goes to any non-physical thing. So what's the line? NRL has to clarify the rule then, because if you're allowed to comment on stuff like that, then why aren't I allowed to comment on swinging arms? Why? Like, what is the justification for me being allowed to comment on this, or a player being allowed to comment this and a player not being allowed to comment on that? Because the rule is, from my understanding, they're not allowed to comment on things that are in front of the
judiciary.
Charged.
Yeah.
Referred to the judiciary or charged. So this is referred straight to the judiciary, so they're not allowed to comment. That's just it. They're not allowed to comment.
Is there going to be action taken against these players for making comment?
Exactly. And because as soon as it went on report, right, because that was what it was. As made a formal complaint, it went on report, arms went over the head in the X, it's on report. You're not allowed to comment. That's what the rule is. Players aren't allowed to comment. And then Latrell Mitchell does a social media post, and everyone goes, we are allowed to comment on this one, so we will. And it should have been shut down immediately. Now, what is the NRL doing? Is it because it's Latrell Mitchell and he's a protected species? Is it... why isn't more media commenting on the fact that it's that they're breaking the rules? I understand the sensitivities of the issue. Okay, I totally understand there are sensitivities around it, but that doesn't mean you can undo due process.
Yeah, as we say, if he happens to be found guilty, go for it. Condemn him. Go for it. Call him out. That's your time to make comment on social media about it.
Exactly.
Not when the outcome of the judiciary hearing is unknown. And it is unknown at this point in time. We need to wait for Leniu to have his say at the judiciary hearing on Tuesday. And then once we reach a verdict, well then we go to the next course. We make our determinations.
And what direction does it go after the judiciary? Okay, you have two directions, right? For if he was found not guilty. Either these players then have to apologise, or they'll double down, and they'll say, Are they allowed to say, like, oh, the NRL system is bullshit or something like that? You know, are they allowed to? Are they going to get fined for that? Because you're also not allowed to criticise the NRL. You know, players aren't allowed to criticise the NRL and stuff like that. They get pinged for that, right? Bringing the game into disrepute. So I don't expect Spencer Leniu to be found not guilty in any way, shape or form.
Yeah.
But if he was, does Nico Hines, Cody Walker and Latrell Mitchell step forward and say, sorry, man, like I was wrong? Or do they double down and go, this is bullshit, and then, you know, obviously Spencer Leniu is getting special treatment, and then what happens? It should have been nipped in the bud straight away. As soon as Latrell Mitchell puts up a post, the NRL should have contacted him and said, take that post down. You have to take that post down. Also, if you don't take it down, we're going to give you a fine. Once it's all done in 2 weeks, then have at you.
Is it fair to say the NRL are just too scared to do that, John?
Of course, absolutely, because it is such a sensitive issue.
Yeah.
And I would expect that I would think that more media would be commenting on it, but they're just not.
They're too scared as well, John. They're too scared.
So, yes, players should be muzzled from commenting on the Leniu-Mam case, I think. That's just my opinion, honestly, guys.
So, it should follow the same process as any other judiciary matter, a high tackle, a crusher tackle, a spear tackle, whatever.
Exactly.
It's a judiciary matter, so we wait and we hold off on making our comments on the matter until that judiciary hearing has played out.
Exactly.
And we've reached a verdict in it, and we are not at that point yet. We won't be until Tuesday night at the conclusion of that hearing.
Yes, 100%. So that's honestly, guys, it's just our opinion. There is some more news discussion around this. Leading defence lawyer has said Leniu won't be faced criminal or civil charges due to America's strict freedom of speech rights.
Yes.
I think it's more to do with the fact that they don't understand. Because if you imagine in an NFL player, an NFL game, if a player had have called an African-American player that worst ever slur ever, what would happen then? I just think it's because they just don't understand.
This leading defence lawyer, Adam Solinger, works for the respected Schaus Law Group in Nevada. Well, he said it's because of America's strict freedom of speech rights that Leniu won't be criminally or civilly charged, John. Solinger said, typically crimes during a sporting match aren't necessarily defended because it's during a sporting match. Just the use of the racial slur alone during a match wouldn't subject him, Leniu, to any legal threat. There's no crime because the only speech that we necessarily punish in Nevada and the United States in general would be threats. So if you're threatening somebody, that could be construed as an assault. Now, an argument, I continue to quote Solinger here, John. Now, an argument can be made in some places that the use of racial slurs is offensive enough that it's like a threat. But unless it's followed up with a direct call to action, I threaten to beat you up, for example, it's not a crime.
Yeah, that's what
Solinger has said.
If it had been the N-word, it would have been a issue. But because they just don't understand that.
Yeah, well, Solinger said he won't face civil action either. He says, and I quote, "We also have civil laws to deal with speech, but you're pretty much allowed to say almost anything," Solinger said.
Yeah, it's not Canada where you're not allowed to say anything. But yeah, I fully reckon it's more to do with the fact that they just don't understand, because in America, the main thing is African-American slurs. And like I said, in an NFL match, if it had been some dude saying the N-word to another dude, they probably would have faced like complete ban, everything. But yeah, like that's just the severe thing. But you can even see from now, because I'm saying the N-word and I will say monkey. Like, it's just the severity of it, really. There's no civil charges or criminal charges because they don't see it as severe. Americans don't see it as severe because they don't understand. They just don't understand the Aboriginal slurs and stuff like that. We can finish up now with the bloody Spencer Leniu.
Yeah, it's occupied a lot of our attention this week.
On to some other news. I've got this now. You know, Corey Parker Broncos update.
It's a daily occurrence, John.
Corey Parker's come out straight after the match and said the reason the Broncos lost is because they let Tom Flegler go. No, Tom Flegler went to, where was it, the Dolphins?
The Dolphins, yeah.
Dolphins. And then Corey Parker comes out with criticism of the Broncos losing, and it's all Tom Flegler's fault. Got to remember they lost one of their forwards 4 minutes into the match there, right? That was them? To HIA.
In the grand final, sorry.
No, in the
sorry.
in the Broncos game against the Roosters.
Oh yeah, Piakura.
Yeah.
Piakura.
So they had to forced to do a reshuffle, and the game was really close.
Yeah.
So it's not Tom Flegler's fault, and it's not Kevin Walters' fault for letting Tom Flegler go that the Broncos lost to the Roosters.
Yeah, because of no Piakura, as you said, ruled out of the game with a HIA. That meant Pat Carrigan was pushed out from lock to the second row, and Parker said, and I quote, Kevy made the decision to put Paddy out on an edge. I think Paddy is ineffective on an edge. It takes from one of his great strengths, particularly through the middle third. And he's gone on to talk about Flegler, and he says, this is Corey Parker, he says, Carrigan and Payne Haas are a 1-2 punch, but before Paddy and Payne Haas, there was a guy called Tom Flegler. There was a 1-2-3 punch. Now that Paddy is out on an edge, there's only one punch.
Yeah, so Corey Parker hammering the Broncos. I really can't wait till next week and to see what happens.
So I think his chances of being invited to the 2026 20-year Brisbane Premiership reunion are just reducing by the day at the moment, John.
Yeah, we'll see what he says when the Broncos play next week. So we'll see what he says negatively about them in the lead-up and in the aftermath, no matter what happens. I'm sure even if they win, the Broncos will have done something wrong.
It's great for us, John. Not so great for Corey Parker's chances of being invited to future premiership reunions.
Yes, yesterday the Las Vegas TV ratings have come out. It's 61,000 Americans watched 61,000 people in America watched the first game of the doubleheader, and 44,000 watched the second game, so for a total of 105,000. Now, the NRL is copping a lot of criticism for that, for like such small numbers in such a large country. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of sport in America. It was never really about numbers, but there's things like, I discussed before, Jake Paul only gets 60,000 PPV sales worldwide. I think the fact that 61,000 American households watched the first game of the doubleheader is pretty good. I never expected it to be 1 million people. The fact that it was on Fox Sports 1, it will be on Fox Sports 1 again next year, is a good thing, and 61,000's plenty.
I mean, it's not a surprise. I looked at the figure and I wasn't surprised on it. It didn't come as any great shock to me. Well, one thing I couldn't work out, I read some quotes from Andrew Abdo on this one, John. And he says this: we had a 61,000 average viewership on Fox Sports 1 for the first game. And that's a quote from Abdo. I continue to quote Abdo, which was more than 1/3 of the marquee college basketball game between Xavier and Georgetown, which preceded our games. That figure also compares to some US Major League Soccer games on Fox Sports 1. The second game attracted an average audience of 44,000. These are the two most watched NRL matches in the US on record. And I sort of go, well, of course they are. Of course, the first two NRL games played in the US at Las Vegas are going to be their most watched games on record, John. I'm not sure whether you can really be beating your chest about that particular fact.
That's kind of using a single stat to prove.
Yeah, it's just... the 61,000, I'm with you on that, John. That's neither here nor there for me. I wasn't shocked either way on that one. But some of the spin from Abdo surprised me. They're the two most watched US NRL games on record. Yeah, they're the first two played in the US. Of course, they're going to be the two most watched US. Of course, they're going to be more likely to watch NRL games played in their country than games not played in their country.
Yeah, the timing for all the others is off. Our games are at 5:30 in the morning and stuff like that in the US. It's nonsense. But yeah, I'm fine with the 61,000. Whatevs. It doesn't matter. It was never about that. Who cares? A lot of people are criticising it and trying to, like, obviously AFL reporters are saying, like, look at their failure and things like that. But man, nobody expected it to get any more than that, really. If you did, you're a madman. It's like thinking the Dragons will win.
The thing I was going to point out, John, was just while we're still on this subject, we've talked a bit about the how this is all about gambling and getting people to bet on it. John, one thing I was going to run past you was a thought of mine. Do you really think they're going to get a lot of gambling traction in America on Australian rugby league? You think they will? So even playing one double header once a year at the start of the year for 5 years, you think that will be enough for Americans for that to get traction with Americans on the gambling front?
I think playing it in America gave them the ability to approach bookmakers to put rugby league on bookmaker sites.
Okay.
And Americans will bet on anything.
So they'll bet on it even if they're not familiar with it?
They bet on like high school football games. They bet on low-level D-League Portuguese soccer matches. They seriously bet on anything. And the thing with them is they don't bet a lot of money individually per person, but there are a lot of them. So it's massive, man.
Wouldn't they have bet on it then if the NRL hadn't gone to Vegas?
No, they needed to get it in front of the bookmakers' eyes and stuff like that.
To get it on the websites.
To get it on the websites,
okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then,
So that's what this is all about?
Yeah, 100%. Because they have to... I comment on Facebook I made to one of my friends, right? Because one of the news articles was all about how this is the amount of fans or whatever they got from playing. And he commented and said, if anybody thinks this was about fans, they're stupid. It's all about gambling money. And I replied to him and I said, number one, America legalized online gambling in all states. That was the first thing that happened. Second thing, Australia moves to ban all gambling during sporting events. Third thing, NRL goes to America.
So it's all about
this series of events.
It's all about getting the NRL on the gambling website.
Yeah, exactly. You go to those the American. You have to use a VPN and stuff like that, and I don't condone it. And it's actually illegal to do. Go and look at American bookmaker sites, and they have so many options, just so many. Because Americans will bet on anything. Seriously, there was actually a bookmaker. I don't know, 20 years ago, where you could actually it was one of the advertising. You could contact them for a market on anything. Or you submit on their website and stuff. So I want to bet on whether the sun will come up tomorrow, and they would put together a market for you. Obviously, no market, but they'd put together a market. They will bet on anything. So yeah, I think it'll get on the bookmakers' websites, and people will start betting on it. Not a lot. It's not going to be massive amounts. I think I can't remember the exact stats, so it's something like on college football in America, it's $11 billion in generated revenue just from gambling per year. Now, they're not going to get $11 billion worth of people betting on rugby league, but if they get 10 million, then 20 million, then 30 million, then 100 million. And there's all these exotic markets and stuff like that as well for the NRL. There's more than any other sport, I swear to God. The NRL has up to 300 and something markets available, and Americans will bet on it. They'll chuck them in multis and stuff like that. They'll do things like, San Francisco Chiefs to beat the 49ers. Oh, and I'll chuck in a first try scorer on some random rugby league match and stuff like that.
So do you think having one doubleheader there once a year every 5 years to open the season will be enough to get on those betting websites?
I think this one is the start, and I don't know if they will just have one doubleheader or they'll start doing other things. It may be that they just have the one doubleheader a year, but I assume they'll start doing other things like get more games played on Fox Sports 1 and things like that throughout the year as well to get it front and centre, and then start getting it into bookmaker websites and get advertising through then, email marketing and stuff like that through bookmakers. Because the whole thing about America is gambling was only legalised in some states. It's kind of rare, legalised gambling in some states. But now, I think it was 2023, they made online gambling legal in every state. So it went from being everybody in America gambles, but a whole bunch of people have to do it only out of state. And now all 330 million Americans can gamble. Well, however many are over, I think gambling age is 18 in America. Yeah, make that make sense. Drinking age 21, gambling age 18. Ruin your life with gambling. when you're a bit younger than ruining your life with alcohol. But yeah, I think there's a process, and the NRL hasn't been fully transparent on it, and everybody is making a lot of assumptions, and the NRL can't be fully transparent on it because they're not going to say it's all about gambling, and then when you go through it, because like I said, when Peter V'landys went and met Joe Biden, my assumption then was he was actually going for horse racing, but under the NRL banner, because he also works for horse racing. But that was before, I realised how big Vegas was. NRL in Vegas was. So
it's all about making it appear as though they're trying to get a slice of the market in America, when in reality all they're trying to do is get on the gambling sites in America.
And you see what happens if we do ban gambling or when they do ban gambling during sports in Australia, and there's no longer sports bet AFL and stuff like that. It'll disappear from their websites and stuff like that too, That's part of the whole thing. Because kids go to the websites. Under 18s go to the NRL and the AFL website and stuff like that. And they have odds there. Sportsbet has odds there. They have an odds feed. So that'll all disappear too. And that will reduce the revenue for the NRL. AFL, unless they find some other source of revenue like the NRL are doing, are going to struggle in coming years. I mean, they will. AFL always does. But they have to find another way to generate that gambling money. It's so much money.
So if that plan comes off and they do get on those gambling websites in America and it brings in a whole heap of revenue for the game, well, you got to hand it to Peter V'landys then.
Exactly.
For thinking outside the square like that.
Exactly.
Which no boss of the game has done before him in that same way.
Yeah, no, I'm going next year. It was so good. So, as I said last week, Vegas doesn't need the NRL to bring tourism.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant. Yeah. But it's still you'll get more people go next year and stuff like that as well. I wouldn't be surprised. Now, I don't like the fact that it's 5 years in Vegas, but obviously Vegas is the center of gambling. There's a reason it's 5 years in Vegas. But I would like to see, it go into other states and stuff too in the future. And that'll be fun, go and play in New York or San Francisco or something like that. Anyway, speaking of Vegas, there's news comes out the Panthers and Storm are in the box seat to play in Vegas next year.
Yes.
Which I think is stupid. What if Panthers and Storm are the wooden spoon teams this year?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Well, I've got the Storm out of the 8. I've got the Panthers up there. But, that seems to be the plan, John. I think it was suggested that, do the Roosters and Manly get rewarded for winning the games this year, and do the Storm and the Panthers, I guess, go there as the challengers next year. I read somewhere that they were talking about, Penrith, because they're having their stadium redeveloped, they could go. And I thought, well, it is only one game. I mean, it is only one game. I'm sure if Penrith don't go to Vegas, they can find somewhere else in Sydney to play for one game.
That's a bit of a weird excuse.
If they can't be playing in Vegas.
I think they shouldn't announce it until after the grand final. That's my thing. And I think it should be a grand final rematch. That should be the reward. And then find 2 other teams that deserve it. And because the draw is made in November.
I guess that's if both the grand final teams want to go.
Why would anyone not want to go? I can't see any of the teams not wanting to go. It's such a big thing for them. So, I would think. And anyway, the NRL should force everybody, whoever they want to go. You're going. That's it. Too bad. But it's just weird that they would start planning who's going now.
There's talk about, they need to be careful in selecting the teams as well, because obviously not every team has has that big a fan base as well, so it needs to be that they need to be careful with how they select the teams for this, to give themselves the best chance of getting as big a crowd as possible over there in the States.
Yeah, well, that's why the number one thing that grows your fan base is winning a premiership. And the number 2 thing that grows your fan base is appearing in the grand final and losing a premiership. Because when you lose, a bunch of fans jump on board expecting you to win next year, because it is pretty common to lose one, win one.
So you think that's an idea to make the the 2 grand final teams have them go to Vegas the following year, and then the decision is who plays in the other game of the doubleheader.
Well, they just work it out based on other things like
other factors like fan base
and who wants to go.
I think you want the better teams going too. You don't want the wooden spooners going.
So are they going to send the West Tigers and Dragons next year?
Highly likely, no.
Dan said no. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'll announce it later in the year. But honestly, the draw gets announced in November. They should do it in November.
It's not a bad idea, that one, John. The grand final teams playing in one of the games.
And last thing with Rugby League still in America, San Francisco's 49 president has made some comments about he would consider buying an NRL team.
Yes.
I read a funny thing about this, right? The Souths, somebody said he should I'll make an offer to Russell Crowe. And he made a funny joke. And then I looked up the value of South. So Russell Crowe bought South for like $3 million. And now they're valued at $45 million. Whoa. That was a good investment.
We should sort of qualify this a little bit, John. The San Francisco 49ers president, Al Guido, was speaking at the NRL's Business and Sport Conference at Las Vegas on Saturday. So you sort of go, well, and then he's spoken to the Sydney Morning Herald and he was asked about, in that context, John, what else is he going to say?
Yeah, exactly.
Of course he's going to say the nice thing. Yeah, I'd be interested. Anyone can say that they'd be interested.
That organisation that he runs owns a bunch of sports teams around the world as well.
Yeah, invested in English Football Club Leeds United.
Yeah, so I think 10 out of the 17 NRL clubs are now
privately owned, yep.
Right? Yeah. Not necessarily by individuals, privately owned by corporations and stuff like that. The Dragons,
either partly or wholly.
Yeah,
yep.
Dragons aren't owned by some dude. They're owned by Win? No, I can't remember, but they're owned by like a corporation as opposed to being... Who else would own them, right? Like, what is it? Yeah, and Manly's owned by those two families that hate each other, and now whatever it is, I don't care. Yeah. But it's
all he said, this guy, was he'd consider buying a stake in an NRL team.
Yeah.
It's not, and he was at an NRL conference, so you sort of go, well, what else was he going to say?
It'd be cool, but the one thing I find funny about these is you imagine something like that, because talk about South's worth $45 million. I think the 49ers is worth like $800 million or something like that. Ridiculous. And if you did own it, you just think like they would do things like put some money in and bring the players to America or to do training camps and stuff. But all that stuff gets salary capped and things like that as well. I remember Russell Crowe, when he took over South, gave all the players BlackBerries. And then it got counted as in the salary cap and he had to take them back. But it was part of like their job. It wasn't like, here's a gift of a BlackBerry. It's back when BlackBerry still existed. It was like, as part of your job, you're also getting a company paid BlackBerry, but it was like they went, no, that's salary cap, sorry. So, yeah, it'll be really interesting. And there's so much money in American sports that them owning a... You look at like what Ryan Reynolds has done with Wrexham United and stuff like that. They're good now. They went from bad. I don't care about soccer, but they went from being bad to being good. So millionaire investments into any sports team is a good thing at all times. $3 million to $45 million. Russell Crowe's Rabbitohs. He saved them from collapsing, no matter what anyone who was against it says.
Yeah, if Russell Crowe hadn't have bought the Rabbitohs, they would have died about 15 years ago, John.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. That's AFL. NRL for the week. We'll have some match updates on
Monday,
yep. And so spoke to Gowie on Tuesday night. I had a good meeting with him. He's going to start sending Gowie's previews every week for everybody to give his tips. So you watch out on social for that. And he'll be in after round 5 to give us a state of the union on how all the teams are going.
Yeah, great. That's something to look forward to, Joel.
So on to just quickly on the AFL. Now, we're not going to break down every game of the AFL because actually we received feedback on the internet that the AFL's not as important as Rugby League. But Bryce from the SmartB Racing Update podcast, now the backer winner / SmartB Racing Update podcast. It's a mouthful. He's also a big AFL tipster. He does a bit of fluttering on the AFL, so he's given us his tips for us to give everybody. And I'll just give some odds. So Colossal Bet is our official AFL sponsor for the year. There's the Swans versus Demons tonight. Don't worry, even if you miss it on the video, these tips will be on the website and stuff. They're even odds, $1.90 each. Bryce reckons...
Type one, John.
Yeah, Melbourne's your good tip. In the Lions versus Carlton, Lions are paying $1.25, and Bryce has tipped the Lions. In the Suns versus the Tigers, Gold Coast is paying $1.48 to Tigers $2.64, and he has tipped the Gold Coast. Now this is your best bet. He's given a best bet. So GWS versus the Magpies. GWS is actually favourites. $1.64 to Magpies, $2.24.
Okay.
But he said, get on the Pies. They're good value this weekend. The reigning premiers know how to get it done in the dying stages. They're coming off winning the 2023 premiership. Considering they're away from home, but there's not this large of a gap price. There shouldn't be this large of a gap price-wise between them. Last time they met, there was nothing between the two teams, expecting the Pies to get it done by a small margin.
225, there's something in that, John, for Collingwood.
I'm actually going to do it.
Yeah, right. Jump on. So that's the AFL starting this weekend. That's actually called the opening round with 4 games. And then the following week, there's round 1. So if you can sort of work that out, you're doing very well. Opening round, 4 games, and then round 1 after that, the weekend after that.
So what they've done, they've dropped themselves into Sydney and Brisbane because we don't have many games in Sydney. They dropped themselves.
I thought it was only a matter
combat the NRL,
and we know there's obviously the NRL started with that Vegas double header, John. But in some way, this is sort of the first weekend of the NRL as well. It's the first weekend on Australian soil. Yeah. So I thought it was only a matter of time before the AFL sort of didn't allow the NRL to have a couple of weeks of a free kick on them. In March, John, I thought, well, it's only a matter of time before the AFL start their season earlier. And that's happening this weekend, John.
I'll tell you what, it's been super annoying for all tipping comps and tipping comp software.
Yes.
Okay, that's it for AFL. We'll give you Bryce's tips every week. Watch out for them on social and on our website under the expert tips. On to just a quick cricket mention. Tomorrow the test is starting. Second test between New Zealand and Australia. It's in Christchurch. Australia's leading 1-0. Overly dominant. They've won... So... Gavin Robertson, Robbo, ex-Australian cricketer, is our cricket ambassador.
Awesome.
He will be on the podcast in March. Oh, it is March now. End of this month to give us an update on where he thinks cricket at is. I spoke to him yesterday as well. Where cricket, I said to him, we criticise Cricket Australia a lot. He said, don't worry, everyone does. You're not the only one. He's also in the band Six and Out with Brett Lee.
Yeah, it's true.
So he's done a preview for us, which will go up on the social later today as well.
Yeah, great, John.
I didn't know that I didn't realise Australia had won like 30 of the last 31 tests against New Zealand.
John, I think it's something that's... I think a lot of the time New Zealand... I think people overrate New Zealand a bit. When you actually look at Australia's record against New Zealand in all formats of the game... Australia is overwhelmingly dominant in New Zealand, John. And we often hear people say, oh, New Zealand are great. New Zealand punch above their weight. New Zealand are fighters and everything. But when you look at the record, John, Australia just are all over New Zealand in cricket.
Yeah, although, except New Zealanders all think that New Zealand is better than Australia, and Australia isn't good. But as I've said multiple times, cricket's on my social media lately. Cricket. Yep, so that starts tomorrow and finishes on Tuesday.
Yes, hoping that Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne can turn it around and score some runs in that one, John.
Robbo actually mentioned one stat that is eluding people is, even though Australia has beat New Zealand in like the last 30 bloody tests or something like that, New Zealand over the past bunch of years, you'll see in the preview more detailed, they've usually, when they've lost a test, they've won the next one. They get he said they kind of come out for revenge. So, see what happens.
And the only thing I would say is sometimes if Australia are a little bit vulnerable, it can be like at the end of a big block of cricket. Like the fatigue can get them a bit. Obviously, they lost that test match to the West Indies. That was a huge shock. But that did come off the back of a Test series in India last year, the Ashes, the World Test Championship, the Cricket World Cup. So these huge events that were on last year, at some stage they were going to catch up with the Aussies, I think. I think they did in that test against the West Indies that they lost. And potentially, well, is this New Zealand's opportunity to pounce on an Australian team? And now we look at the calendar, John. It's Australia's last game before that 2020 World Cup at the in the middle of the year. So are the Aussies, have they sort of got one eye on a bit of a holiday here, John? And is this an opportunity for New Zealand to take advantage of that fatigue potentially?
And you got to remember in the last test, we won the first innings through the heroics of Cameron Green. And then in the second innings, it was Nathan Lyon.
Nathan Lyon top scored in that second
all people.
innings.
We'll have an update on Monday, but it's meant to finish on Tuesday. This weekend is UFC 299, so watch out for mine and Jake's tips. Hopefully I can get Jake this time. We have tipped a lot differently. Just some matches to watch. Michael Venom Page, who's considered one of the most elite strikers in the world, will be making his debut against Big Mouth Kevin Holland. His nickname is Big Mouth because he talks during matches. There's a heap funny fight in which he farted and then he asked his opponent, "Did you hear me fart?" Dustin Poirier is fighting Benoit St. Denis. It's Dustin Poirier's first non-major fight. He's fought Conor McGregor twice, Justin Gaethje, Khabib Nurmagomedov, like all of the top guys only. Charles Oliveira fought for the championship multiple times, so that'll be a cracker. And then the main event is Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Cheeto Vieira. As I said, Sean O'Malley's undefeated except for against Cheeto. Sean O'Malley says he didn't lose, but he did. It was a pretty crappy fight because Sean O'Malley's leg broke strangely in the fight, and then Marlon Vera won off that, but should be a good fight. That'll all go down on Sunday, I think, at 12 p.m. Anyway, watch out for our tips. Get your bets on, bet with your head not over it. In other sports news, this Sam Kerr thing just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So she's been charged with racially aggravated harassment of a police officer stemming from getting into an argument with a taxi driver and the police being called and then Sam Kerr intimidating the police officer. Now, this happened more than a year ago. Sam Kerr's only been charged 2 weeks ago, and she didn't inform Soccer Australia or anyone.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the coach of the team of the Matilda's coach Tony Gustafsson and Football Australia's CEO James Johnson, they were unaware of the incident until Tuesday Australian time. So
so it's, like I said, it happened a year ago, more than a year ago.
January 2023.
And then she only got charged 2 weeks ago, and then they found out when the news broke.
And I've read conflicting reports on what she actually said, John, so I'm not going to say what she said because I've read conflicting reports. So I don't want to... And what she's alleged to have said, again, like always in these matters, John, the person is innocent until proven guilty, and that goes for Sam Kerr here. She's entitled to her day in court.
Well, her lawyer has submitted, what is it called? I can't remember what it's called, to have the charges dropped straight away. So... Sam Kerr is currently recovering from her ACL injury, trying to get back in time for the Paris Olympics, which isn't going to happen. But, we'll see what happens with that. Yeah,
they want to apply to have the case dismissed on grounds of abuse of process. So,
how do you... That happens a year ago and only get charged a year ago? It's a bit weird to me.
It's a strange one, John.
Yeah.
John, what I wanted to raise on this matter is that Anthony Albanese has come out and essentially given Sam Kerr a character reference, John. So I'll read Albanese's quotes. The Prime Minister, he says, "I don't comment on legal matters before Australian courts, let alone other ones." So he says that. And then he seems to follow it up with essentially what's a character reference for Sam Kerr. He says, "I will say this about my contact with Sam Kerr. She was our flag bearer at the coronation. My contact with her was exemplary. She did Australia proud at that time, and I think that my contact with her has been nothing but delightful. So he says all that after saying, I don't comment on legal matters before Australian courts, let alone other ones. He says that, and then he goes on to say that about Sam Kerr. So he sort of contradicts himself there, I would have thought, John.
I don't know why Anthony Albanese is saying anything, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't either, John. And obviously Albanese has met Sam Kerr and dealt with her before, John. But if Sam, and I'm presuming that Anthony Albanese's never met Spencer Leniu, John, but Spencer Leniu's essentially in the same boat as Sam Kerr. He's been accused of racism, just like Sam Kerr's been accused of racism. So if Anthony Albanese had have met Spencer Leniu in the past, would Anthony Albanese be giving Spencer Leniu a character reference now, John? Or
I don't think so.
Perhaps not. No.
Because he's not as famous as Sam Kerr, and Anthony Albanese needs to connect his name. What's that? There's a TV show called Veep with Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Elaine from Seinfeld.
Yeah,
yep.
It's so funny. And in one of the episodes, she's at some tech company and they're doing a sound cloud behind her of the words she says. And her political opponent's been accused of committing torture in Afghanistan. He's an ex-soldier. So she keeps saying the word, like the political opponent's name and the word torture, but saying whatever his name, I can't remember what his name was, like, say, Dan would never commit torture. I cannot believe that Dan would do torture. I would never believe any torture when it's referenced to Dan. So in the sound cloud, it's just like, Dan, torture, behind her. And that's what seems to be what Anthony Albanese does. Anthony Albanese, Sam Kerr, and so on. So, yeah, I don't know why he's commenting. And
yeah, it's
you know what would be nice? If Anthony Albanese commented on the cost of living crisis that we're currently facing.
Yeah, it'd be nice if he did his job once in a while, John. So very, very curious, very mysterious. That I would have thought Anthony Albanese should have just... His first line was pretty good, John. I don't comment on legal matters before Australian courts, let alone other ones. I think he would have been better off just leaving it at that, John, rather than going on and talking more about Sam Kerr. Again, Sam Kerr is entitled to her day in court. We're not going to predetermine any court case, John. We don't do that on here. But what a mysterious and curious time for the Prime Minister of Australia to be giving Sam Kerr a character reference when she's been charged with what she's been charged with, John. What a very curious thing to do from the Prime Minister. It's a mystery to me. I'm baffled by it, John, I have to say.
It's a bit weird. So we'll see what happens with Sam Kerr. Maybe her charges will be dropped and it's all because of Anthony Albanese. Meanwhile, so we can mention Taylor Swift and her NFL boyfriend, Travis Kelce.
Yes.
Jason Kelce's brother has retired. From what?
Travis Kelce's brother.
Sorry, Travis Kelce's Jason has recovered from what?
Yeah, he's an NFL player.
Nobody knows who that guy is. He's Travis Kelce's brother, and Travis Kelce's only famous because he's dating Taylor Swift.
Yeah, he's in his retirement press conference. Jason Kelce apparently made a couple of references to Taylor Swift songs, John, and it's been picked up by Swifties online. So the quote from Jason Kelce was, "It's only too poetic. I found my career being fulfilled in the city of brotherly love. I knew that relationship all too well," he says. And apparently that's a reference to Taylor Swift's iconic Red Taylor's version track, All Too Well. That's one reference to Taylor Swift songs. That didn't stop there, though, John. Apparently, Jason Kelce made a reference to another of Swift's hits, this time Wildest Dreams from her 2014 album 1989. A 2014 album 1989, work that out. If you go, this is the quote, "If you go above and beyond in this city, you will be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams," Jason Kelce said. So there's so Swifties were delighted with those two references to Taylor Swift songs in his retirement
Taylor
speech.
Swift has like 600 albums and 45,000 songs, and so now you can't say anything without someone saying it's Taylor Swift's. So these people need to understand the words "in your wildest dreams" have been around for hundreds of years. Seriously, she's got like so many. I didn't know how many albums she has. Crazy how many albums she has. She's got another one coming. I think it's called 1989 because that's the year she was born. I think, but I don't know. I just assumed. And she had the 1989 tour when she did it. And
that sounds about right. She would have been born about then, John, 1989.
And now onwards again to our other favourite topic. Donald Trump has bragged about having... Oh, sorry. Misread it. Nick Kyrgios.
It's easy to make that mistake, John.
Has bragged about having a billboard promoting his podcast in California. You know how you get a billboard? I'll tell you, it's a secret, okay? It's going to release this to the world. You buy it.
Yeah. A lot of people could afford that, and he's just one of them. So, you don't have to really earn a billboard, John. You can just, as long as you got the right amount of money to pay for it, well, you can put whatever you want up there.
You pay money up there. So what are you bragging about?
Yeah. It was a billboard in California, John, promoting his new podcast series. The placard read, "Off the court, still in trouble. Good trouble with Nick Kyrgios. Watch on YouTube." And Nick Kyrgios wrote next to the picture, "Billboards in Cali, kid from Canberra." So he seems quite fond of himself that he's on that billboard, John. Just more narcissistic behaviour from Nick Kyrgios. I should put
myself on a billboard. I'm going to do it next week. And then, Actually, producer John, can we mock something up? And then I can, sweet. Yeah, thanks, Donald Trump. Sorry, Nick Kyrgios. Sorry, I just can't help it. Onto tennis, because we always got to have a tennis mention. Carlos Alcaraz has beaten Rafael Nadal in Las Vegas in the Netflix Slam.
Yes.
It's so much tennis now than there's the Netflix Slam. That was on Monday, right?
Yeah, so it was Monday morning. It was actually on Monday morning while we were doing the podcast on this one. It's shown on Netflix. Carlos Alcaraz beat Rafael Nadal 3-6, 6-4, 14-12 in that match tiebreaker. Las Vegas on Sunday, the day after the NRL doubleheader in Las Vegas, John.
Now, see, if Rafael Nadal hadn't have been injured, he'd be better than Novak Djokovic, but he got beat by Carlos Alcaraz. Yeah,
I mean, to be fair to Nadal, I'm not surprised by the result, John. He's been out for so long.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Michael Douglas, Catherine Zeta-Jones and Charlize Theron were in attendance at the match, John. So
they did better. Definitely paid for them to be there.
I think they did better than the NRL did in terms of celebrity turn-ups, John, as you would
definitely
expect.
Paid for them. By the way, Beyonce came out of retirement and played some Indian billionaire's wedding for $9.8 million. So that's what it takes to get her to play the halftime show between the doubleheader halftime show. Get Beyonce there, NRL, and you'll have 65,000 people. That's it for other sports news. We can move on to social media blower-uppers. Our social media has blowered-uppered.
Yes.
Apparently, we shouldn't talk about America. But Mark BPH2336 on the Dragons preview. Flanagan's a good coach. The problem has always been Anthony Griffin. The Dragons had an underperforming team. The Dragons have a monster backline that will help them outmuscle many teams. Coach Shane Flanagan will bring fitness, better defense, and discipline accountability. Last year, the Dragons had so many close games with 6 points and only won 30% of them. I think teams like the Tigers, Titans, Bulldogs, Raiders, Knights, and Dolphins are more likely to collect the wooden spoon. As with all seasons, injuries to key players could be disastrous for the Dragons if Ben Hunt and Lomax, great goal kicker, stay healthy. There's no way they get the spoon. Future looks, I think it means good. Bring for the club if they manage the wealth of junior talent well. Great vid, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
You must be a Dragons fan. I like that you think they can do well. I hope the Tigers, Titans, Bulldogs, Raiders, Knights, or Dolphins get the wooden spoon. I still don't have any faith in it, no matter what people are saying. I just don't have any faith. I agree that the Dragons underperform. They just keep getting brought up. Last year they had so many close games within 6 points and only won 30% of them. The thing with that is that I like to point out to everyone is there is a clear numerical indicator for who was the better team, the one that won. And the Dragons, using that numerical indicator, the Dragons were the worst team in 70% of those games. And they were the worst team all year in 70% of their games and almost collected the wooden spoon. Mm-hmm. So just because they were close to winning, doesn't matter if you win by a metre or a mile. Winning's winning. Thanks, Dom. Yeah.
Hopefully, new coach, John. Hopefully he can do something there.
We'll see. MJI Impresario on the Knights preview. Knights will make the top 8 and challenge for a top 4 spot if they start the season well. I don't think so, brother. Sorry, I just don't think it. I just don't think it at all. On a short of when Craig Gower was talking about JWH should have been exempt from suspension, which we now know can happen, and maybe that's one of the reasons. Trav Moffat 9886 said exactly well said. Damon M. Linerick 9254 said, yeah, but Jared hasn't been that good for years anyway. I think maybe JWH's main issue is the suspensions, and that's what makes him not good.
Well, when he's on the field, he's a gun, John. His problem is he's just not on the field enough. Too many suspensions.
JD's 3966 said, what do you mean you don't know why? It's obvious rules are rules. For the game to have any integrity, there has to be consistency in enforcing rules, because under what circumstances do you draw the line? A suspension happens because that player effed up. What's the point of the suspension if you're just going to let them off every time? This is a good point, and we discussed this recently. However, the NRL, when they ask exactly this, JD's 3966, under what circumstances do you draw the line? Everyone would like to know that right now. Everyone. Why did Mitch Kenny get to play and get suspended? Why did some people get to use the All-Stars match? Why didn't others? Like that kind of thing. We'd like to know.
It's this picking and choosing, John, picking and choosing suspension times. I mean, to be fair to Craig Gower, John, he's just thinking about the big picture of the game as a whole, and obviously the Las Vegas, obviously it's at this point it's a one-off. It's never happened before, so he's just saying, well, in this instance, could we make some sort of allowance for JWH? And he says, I think the commenter said something like, where are you going to draw the line? Well, maybe that's one instance where you let it slide. But that having been said, John, I did say the other day that, overwhelmingly I am against the sort of selecting of when you're going to serve suspended games. I think you're suspended. I
think the most important thing you actually said in all of that was the NRL should sit down the 16 clubs and ask them. Because right now you're getting the NRL just making willy-nilly weird decisions. Even Luciano Leilua getting his suspension halved is weird to me. I mean, it was stupid that he got suspended and everything, like it affects the Dragons, and that's what I didn't like about it. But he should have still kept his 2-game suspension.
Yeah, suspension is a suspension,
On the same video, Ability Limo 112 said, I understand, however, then it creates precedent where players can get off serious charge because there's a big game on, which is actually true. Like, that's the big issue with it. On the shoulder, Nathan Gower talking about Nathan Cleary and the halves at Penrith, where he mentioned Jet was coming up too. Typical Tonk said how to speak for 30 seconds without saying anything. It is a short, so what's the whole conversation if you want to know what they were saying?
Yeah, that's a bit harsh, John.
And then Gowie talking about the NRL having a stronger hold on the eastern seaboard and internationally, so that's what it's got over the AFL, and the AFL being boring. Magus123 said, AFL doesn't need to grow when it has the whole country. The NRL can only grow because it only has 3/4 of the eastern seaboard is not the winning statement. You think it is?
Well, I mean, the NRL does have 2 of the 3 biggest markets in New South Wales and Queensland as well, John, so to sort of dismiss it as only has the eastern seaboard, I mean, that's 2 of the 3, it's got 2 of the 3 biggest markets in the country, so I mean, that's a little bit, that comment's a little bit misleading to me, exactly.
John. And then Troy Ryan 6158 said AFL is stupid. That's mean. AFL's not stupid.
Yeah, that's not constructive, John. That's a bit silly.
Yeah. And then, so honestly, guys, it's just our opinion for the media coverage of the NRL has gone gangbusters. I don't know what the go is. That like 30 comments, 5,000 views or something now. Getting comments now. So we're not going to go through all the comments because there's way too many. There's literally like 30 of them. We'll just go through some. I'm just going to delete those too. Aaron Lewis 2501 said, I think the NRL needs to start in smaller market cities if they wanted to enter the US markets. Cities such as Jacksonville, Kansas City, Charlotte, etc. Trying to compete in large cities is hard. Too many things to do in cities like Miami and LA, and the NRL needs to start in high schools and cultivate an audience that will understand what they're watching, because I tried and I was lost.
That's a fair comment there, John.
It is something they can do. There are some rugby league junior teams and stuff in America, and we talked about last week maybe the NRL should invest money. Somebody said that last week on a comment No, I can't remember what it was. We talked about it last week. Maybe the NRL should invest money on Monday. Laced Goods 9155. For it to work, it's got to appeal to the hoods in America. This is actually the lowest common denominator is where you get popularity. It's true. You need to appeal to... I'm going to reinterpret this silly comment into, yes, you do have to appeal to the mass market audience. Robbie Balboa, he specifically tagged a time at 14 minutes 57. And it's where we were talking about the TV deal and the fans are actually less relevant than the gambling revenue. And he said, you can't get more rugby league than that. Pokies in leagues clubs been a thing since almost, I think it means forever. Yeah, exactly. It's all about gambling.
We're just being honest about that, John.
On Zoot Zin Boots was talking about how it was 18 minutes late. He said, can you imagine if the Melbourne Cup or Sydney to Hobart had an 18-minute late TV commencement? Look, it wasn't 18 minutes late. It was moved to another channel.
It was moved to another channel, and then it went to the main channel once they came off that college basketball game.
Very different if the Melbourne Cup had an 18-minute delay, because that'd be over.
Yeah.
As opposed to Sydney to Hobart, I don't think it'd make it. Isn't the Sydney Hobart to, like, days?
Yeah. I don't know how many people are watching the Sydney to Hobart these days,
Do
John.
actually people watch it? Dave B3987 said, beautiful Steelers jersey. Why the Dragons don't wear it as a permanent alternate strip is beyond me. I know why. It's because there was a period of time where actually merchandise was one of the major sources of revenue for all clubs. And so all of the clubs started to churn out dozens of different jerseys. There was a time when West Tigers wore like 12 different strips. And that's why, because they had to just keep churning out jerseys and making new jerseys so people would buy them. I counted them yesterday, 40 jerseys. 20 of them are Dragons jerseys. And they're all from back in the day.
That's a lot of jerseys.
Yeah, like there was from back in the day where they just were churning out jerseys all the time. Now they churn out like 3 a year, 4 a year. There's the Indigenous round one, there's the Women in League one, and then usually there's like 2 others because they don't have to concentrate on jersey sales anymore.
That's a good one, the one you got on, John.
Yeah,
I like that one.
This was my favourite. It was the first ever jersey I got, actually.
It's a good design. I like it.
It's the Steelers, bro.
Yeah.
Addies one said, while TV coverage didn't go to plan, I believe the NRL is successful in the sense that they can be satisfied that NRL have a good product. It was exciting and entertaining. There was enough evidence to show that given a bit of tweaking on what worked and what didn't work and how to better improve on it, maybe potentially they could reach that 1% market they're hoping for. Whoever thought Las Vegas would be created in the middle of the desert? The possibilities are endless. It's true. That's what we said the other day. They need to do a review now and find out what worked and what didn't. I really hope they get some music acts between the games. Like they really should do
a
it.
30 or 45-minute break between the games wouldn't go astray,
Yeah,
John.
exactly. Zig's Vids, it's not for Americans, it's for Australian, and it worked perfectly. 2024 footy is on 100%, bro.
Yeah, I think I think Fox Sports said the 2 games were the 2 most watched games in their history. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Fox Sports in Australia.
They did. Then Stuart Keylock on Matilda's post that we had about the Matildas playing China at Adelaide Oval. So they're playing a warm-up game before the Paris Olympics at Adelaide Oval. I say I love the Matildas. They're an amazing team, and I hope they beat China 12-0. Not unlikely. They did win 10-0 the other day.
Yeah. They've got goal-scoring ability left, right and centre, John.
That's it for the social media blower-uppers. As I said, we got a lot more lined up.
Yeah.
More notifications came through. Congratulations to Mitch Lucas on winning the round 0 tipping competition. He got his $100. Don't forget to sign up and get on there, and you too can win $100.
Do you need me to give you my tips too?
I already got them.
Oh, yes.
I already got them. You just came.
You got them.
Yeah. And make sure you sign up to SmartB for the tip of the day. You can still win tickets to Subversion. I think it's drawn in 2 weeks. Subversion is 6th of April. Just confirmed Jake O'Driscoll will be coming to do a Subversion and UFC 300 preview. Follow Bryce and Lewis's Back a Winner / SmartB racing update every Friday for tips. Also follow Back a Winner and head to Back a Winner for all your racing content. We get a lot more racing content on there. And don't forget to follow @SmartB app on social media. Cool.
Thanks, Sean. Enjoy the rest of round one, mate. I'll speak to you on Monday.
Yeah, definitely. See you, Dan, and goodbye, producer John.